Imagine a tech company today trying to sell the exact same smartphone they designed back in like 1973.
Oh, they'd be bankrupt by Friday. I mean, it's unthinkable.
Right. No software updates, no camera upgrades, no sleek redesigns to make it, thinner or more futuristic.
Yeah, the market would just completely reject it.
Exactly. Or, well, think about modern pop stars. They have entirely different eras every 18 months or so.
Yes, they completely changed their sound, their wardrobe, their whole public persona.
And their political aesthetic, too, just to keep up with the public's notoriously short attention span. I mean, we live in an era that is completely obsessed with constant frantic reinvention.
It really is the defining feature of a hyper-accelerated culture. Like, if you aren't actively dismantling your old self and rebranding, the default assumption is that you're just falling behind.
Stagnation is basically treated like cultural death. And that brings us to the absolutely fascinating paradox at the heart of today's deep dive. Because, amidst all of that endless, exhausting shape-shifting, there is one band, a globally dominant cultural force that has done the exact same thing for 50 years.
It's wild when you really step back and look at it.
Right. No eras, no reinventions, no acoustic experimental phases, no synth pop detours. I am, of course, talking about AC/DC.
It's an incredible phenomenon to unpack. When we really look at the cultural mechanics of this, it forces us to completely question our basic assumptions about what makes art relevant, and how longevity actually works.
So today we're taking a massive stack of cultural sociology, musical analysis, and behavioral research, and we're putting AC/DC under the microscope.
Yeah, we've got some amazing source material to go through.
We really do. But I want to be clear right up front about our mission here for you, the listener. We aren't doing a standard rock biography today.
No, definitely not.
We aren't just recounting the wild tour stories or doing a simple track-by-track album review. We are looking at this material to understand AC/DC as a completely closed meaning system.
Right.
We are examining them as a highly specific identity model and quite literally a worldview.
Which is a profound way to look at them because, well, AC/DC is so often dismissed by casual critics as simple or even primitive.
Yeah, you hear that a lot, like it's just 3 chords and a lot of screaming.
Exactly.
Ugh.
But when you break down the research, you realize that this simplicity is not a lack of ideas. It's not an absence of creativity or musical ability. It is actually a highly sophisticated aesthetic and cultural program.
So the goal today is to understand exactly why this radical stubborn reduction works so effectively, right?
Yes. And what it offers you, the listener, as a potential model for navigating a modern world that is overwhelmingly, almost suffocatingly complex.
Let's start with the music itself, because there is a profoundly insightful point right out of the gate in the analysis. AC/DC doesn't just play rock music. They sing about rock music.
They do,
Yeah.
constantly.
Right. If you look at their catalog, words like rock, roll, high voltage, power, noise, and thunder, they aren't just random, cool-sounding lyrics. The sources show they form a very specific, fiercely guarded vocabulary.
Yeah, the music is obsessively talking about the music.
In academic terms, the text calls this the art of self-thematization.
It sounds like heavy jargon, but the concept is brilliantly simple, really. It just means the art is speaking about its own form and making that form its primary subject matter.
Okay, so give us an example of how that works in practice.
Well, think about the song Let There Be Rock. It's literally a mythological origin story. It's almost biblical in its framing about the creation of rock and roll music.
Oh, wow, right.
When they sing about the volume of the guitars or the electricity in the venue, they are creating a closed loop of meaning.
It's like a snake eating its own tail, but in a way that generates endless energy.
That's a great way to put it.
Because by constantly naming the genre they are playing, rock stops being just a category on a record store shelf. It transforms into a symbol, it becomes an ethos.
Exactly. And this leads right into the concept of the riff as a worldview.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So the aesthetic here is built on radical, unapologetic reduction. You have a straight, 4/4 beat, relentless repetition, and a complete intentional lack of ornamental complexity.
Right, there are no lush string sections or complex jazz time signatures happening here.
None at all. It is built entirely around the riff. And musically speaking, a riff is a short, repeated phrase that acts as the absolute anchor of the song.
The breakdown of the dynamic between the guitarists is where this gets so rich in the source material. You have Angus Young on lead guitar and his late brother Malcolm Young on rhythm guitar.
Yes, and the analysis shows this isn't just a convenient division of labor. It's basically a moral structure.
A moral structure, how so?
Well, Angus is giving you these wild, frantic, chaotic solos, right? He represents total freedom.
Yeah, he's the guy running around like a maniac.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But that freedom only exists, it only functions without collapsing into a total mess, because Malcolm is ruthlessly maintaining the rhythm in the background. Malcolm is the absolute unyielding order.
The rhythm section, Malcolm on rhythm guitar, the bass, the drums, they're not there to decorate the song?
No, they're there to carry it like a massive weight. That interplay between movement and foundation demonstrates something deeply resonant.
It is.
Explosive freedom is only possible and only impactful when the underlying order is strictly maintained.
Okay, let's unpack this with a visual because this analogy really helped me understand it. It's like looking at a perfectly engineered suspension bridge.
So I like that.
You don't need decorative gargoyles or intricate gold leaf paint jobs if the structural integrity of the steel cables is flawless. The function is the beauty.
Right, the tension is the point.
Exactly. The immense, terrifying tension between the thick steel cables and the concrete pillars is what allows heavy trucks to cross the river safely. So in the AC/DC universe, Malcolm is the concrete pillar sunk deep into the bedrock, and Angus is the raw electricity running across the exposed wires of the bridge.
That is a fantastic way to visualize the mechanics at play. And it perfectly explains why this level of predictability, which, again, traditional music critics constantly attack as boring or formulaic, is actually a massive social resource for the audience.
A social resource. That's a really interesting way to frame it.
Well, think about your average day. For you, the listener, we exist in a world characterized by infinite choices, constant digital fragmentation, and absolute decision fatigue.
Oh, totally. You have thousands of shows to stream, hundreds of emails to answer, countless micro-decisions to make every single hour.
Exactly. And AC/DC offers a profound, almost physical sense of relief from that. You don't have to decipher a complex political metaphor in the lyrics.
Right.
You don't have to interpret a tricky sonic shift. You just have to experience the physical impact of the sound.
Right. The vocabulary is radically, almost aggressively grounded in the present.
Yes.
There is no promise of spiritual salvation in the afterlife. There is no utopian political theory being outlined. It is entirely about tempo, noise, the physical body, and collective immediate release.
It's a radical focus on the here and now. The music demands your physical presence, not your intellectual interpretation.
It's a binary state, really. The electricity is either on or it is off.
And when it's on, it provides instant, temporary relief from the staggering complexities of everyday life.
But, you know, if this music is essentially a perfectly engineered, entirely predictable script about the undeniable power of rock, well, a script is just words on paper until actors perform it.
That's true.
So where does that script actually get actualized? Because you can only get so much out of listening to a vinyl record in your living room, right?
This is where we have to look at the physical space. The core argument in the cultural analysis is that AC/DC is only half understood if you restrict yourself to their recorded albums.
Okay, so what's the other half?
The true core, the beating heart of the band's identity, is the live performance. And the researchers argue we shouldn't even call it a concert. Sociologically speaking, it functions as a strict ritual.
Ritual is a heavy word. Usually we associate that with religion, you know, incense, solemn chanting, that kind of thing.
Right, but in this context, the analysis defines ritual as organized repetition with emotional intensification.
Organized repetition with emotional intensification. Let me make sure I've got that. A ritual is a designated space and time where people come together, they know the procedures intimately, they expect specific highlights, and they experience something extraordinary precisely because of that recurrence.
Yes, exactly. It's the structured, agreed-upon repetition that creates the deep social meaning.
When you look at the visual markers of an AC/DC show through that lens, things that might seem like cheesy, fun gimmicks suddenly look like highly calculated architecture.
Oh, absolutely. Like Angus Young's schoolboy uniform.
Right. Or the very specific paths he runs across the stage. The giant, ominous tolling bell that slowly descends from the rafters for Hell's Bells.
The firing of massive, literal cannons to close the show for those about to rock.
Yeah, these aren't just stage props to make the show look expensive. The sources suggest they are signals that manage the crowd's neurochemistry.
They are the mechanisms of the ritual. They organize anticipation.
So when that bell starts to lower, the crowd doesn't just hear a sound.
No, their emotional state is immediately directed and synchronized. These visual and auditory markers form a shared, unspoken language between the band and the tens of thousands of people in the audience.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If I know that the cannon is going to fire at the exact same moment on the exact same chord at 10:45 p.m. every single night of the tour, doesn't that inherently make it boring?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you ride a roller coaster 10 times, you know exactly where the drop is and the adrenaline fades. Doesn't total predictability kill the thrill of live music? Aren't we supposed to value spontaneity?
That is the logical assumption for a culture that idolizes the new. But ritual theory counters that exact point beautifully.
How so?
In a ritual setting, repetition is not the opposite of intensity, it is the absolute condition for it.
Wait, really? The condition for it?
Yes, the crowd knows the canon is coming. That shared anticipation, the communal waiting for the expected promised release, is the entire point.
Oh, I see.
The emotional peak works not because it's a surprise, but because the audience is actively, collectively waiting for a specific promise to be fulfilled. And the band flawlessly delivers on that promise.
So it's not about the shock of discovery. It's about the comfort of ratification. It's the fulfillment of a contract between the band and the fans.
Exactly. And the performer has a specific role in that contract. There is a great phrase the text uses to describe Angus Young's extreme physical exertion on stage.
Which is?
All the profuse sweating, the full-speed sprinting across the riser, the famous duck walk, rolling around on the floor while still playing a blistering solo. This is categorized as a literal proof of truth.
I love that phrase, proof of truth. The music is deemed authentic because it visibly exacts a severe, undeniable physical toll on the performer.
Yeah, you can't fake that kind of sweat.
No, you really can't. The physical body becomes the ultimate guarantor of authenticity.
Right. The performance communicates that this rock music is real, not just a studio trick, because you can see what it physically costs the person playing it.
It's not a sterile, effortless display of technical virtuosity where the guitarist stands perfectly still. It is immense labor. It is sweat and exhaustion.
And that connects on a profound level with an audience that values hard work, physical endurance, and a complete lack of pretense.
And this brings up the concept of liveness or co-presence. The audience at an AC/DC ritual isn't just standing there passively consuming the music like they would if they were casually screaming a playlist on a commute.
Not at all. They are ratifying the message in real time.
By screaming the lyrics about the power of rock back at the band, singing about the power of rock, the audience turns the song into a physical, social reality.
This is where the ritual achieves its ultimate sociological goal, really. It creates a temporary boundary-dissolving event.
A boundary-dissolving event. What does that look like on the floor of the stadium?
Well, when you are inside that massive venue, vibrating with the sound of Malcolm's rhythm guitar, the normal, rigid hierarchies of the outside world completely vanish.
So your job title, your age, your social status.
Your massive pile of digital distractions, none of it matters. You are unified by the physical pulse of the music and the shared knowledge of the ritual.
It's a beautifully, flawlessly engineered system, but it begs a massive existential question.
Let's hear it.
If this entire ritual, this entire closed meaning system we've been unpacking, relies completely on the exact same elements being executed flawlessly time and time again, what happens when the literal voice of the ritual suddenly dies?
That is the ultimate stress test for any narrative institution. And it leads us directly into the most critical, defining juncture in the band's entire history.
We are talking about February 1980, the tragic, sudden death of the legendary frontman Bon Scott.
Yes.
Now, for almost any other band on Earth, losing a charismatic frontman who wrote the lyrics and defined the attitude is an absolute death sentence.
Completely. The group identity is usually so entirely tied to that specific individual that trying to continue just feels like a cynical cash grab or a betrayal to the fans.
Right, so how did this group survive when its literal voice vanished?
The cultural analysis of this pivot is astonishing. They achieve something incredibly rare in popular culture, which the sources call controlled continuity.
Controlled continuity. So they didn't break up, but they also didn't undergo a radical reinvention to distance themselves from the tragedy.
Exactly. Let's really look at the mechanics of how they did that with the introduction of Brian Johnson.
Because Brian didn't come in and try to erase Bon Scott's legacy, but he also didn't try to be a cheap, flawless Bon Scott impersonator.
Right. He stepped into the exact same structural role within the ritual.
The guitar architecture, that heavy rhythmic foundation we talked about with Malcolm, the lyrical themes, it all remained absolutely stable.
He occupied the designated space without violating the established parameters of the ritual.
That's a great way to phrase it.
The band implicitly understood that the structure was larger than any single component, even the frontman. And a key mechanism that allowed fans to accept this transition is what researchers call the double canon.
The double canon. This psychological trick is so fascinating in the research. Tell us about that.
Well, the band never stopped playing the Bon Scott-era songs live. They didn't bury their past.
Right, they essentially layered their history. They allowed the fans to actively mourn the loss of Bon Scott through the performance of his old songs, while simultaneously celebrating the fierce survival of the band, with Brian Johnson singing the new ones.
That integration is crucial. This double canon approach meant that a fan's sense of belonging wasn't torn between loyalty to the past and acceptance of the present.
You didn't have to choose sides.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
The band integrated the grief directly into the ongoing ritual itself. It forces us to ask a really deep question about art.
What's that?
What truly makes a band's identity? Is it just the magical aura of a charismatic individual at the front? Or is it a narrative institution built on repertoire, a highly specific sonic architecture, and the fulfillment of audience expectation?
And they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt it's the latter.
Absolutely.
They proved that a cultural identity, if the symbols and the structural foundation are strong enough, can actually absorb the loss of an irreplaceable individual. And the undeniable proof of this is the album Back in Black.
Yes. The timeline here is just staggering.
Let's remind everyone, Bon Scott dies in February 1980. Back in Black with Brian Johnson is released in July 1980.
Just 5 months later.
5 months. And it goes on to become one of the absolute best-selling albums in the entire history of recorded music.
The staggering historic success of Back in Black demonstrates something vital about their audience. The fans viewed the band's absolute refusal to undergo an aesthetic self-reform as the highest possible form of authenticity.
By not changing their sound to reflect their grief, by not writing a bunch of slow, somber acoustic ballads.
Right, by just doubling down on the sheer crushing power of the riff, they proved their resilience. The best way to honor the ritual was to ensure the ritual didn't stop.
So the authenticity of the band is intimately tied to this incredibly rigid, unchanging image. But as modern observers, we have to acknowledge that this image is built heavily around very traditional, highly codified, hard rock tropes. And that brings us to a really complex, thorny part of our deep dive. How does that rigid image, written in the 1970s, hold up under the microscope of modern cultural criticism?
It's a necessary analytical turn. We have to look at the masculinity, the excess, and the complex cultural code they operate within. The visual and lyrical vocabulary of AC/DC is heavily male-coded.
Right. We are talking about overt sexual explicitness in the lyrics, relentless themes of excessive drinking, raw, aggressive physical energy, and an overall aesthetic of impenetrable hardness.
Yes, those are the undeniable hallmarks of the style.
And our goal here, for you, the listener, isn't to moralize or pass judgment either way. As with all of our deep dives, we are looking impartially at the sources to see how these codes are structured and how they are uniquely received by different audiences in the real world.
Exactly. To understand the phenomenon sociologically, we have to strip away the emotion and look at the mechanisms of this coding.
Okay, so what do the mechanisms look like?
The lyrics are frequently saturated with sexual innuendo, double entendres, and boundary-pushing metaphors. This is paired with the physical distortion of the overdriven guitars and the loud, driving, body-centric rhythms.
Historically speaking, the text notes this aesthetic belongs to a 1970s working-class rock culture where a very specific, rough-hewn traditional masculinity was simply accepted as the default setting.
It was the ultimate boys' club aesthetic of the time.
But when you dig into the cultural analysis, the researchers introduce a really vital nuance that completely changes how this is perceived, and it's something surface-level critics almost always miss.
And what was that?
It's the role of humor. It's performative overstatement. When they were singing these massive, swaggering, incredibly burstful anthems, it's almost grotesque or comic in its exaggeration.
Yes, it's not meant to be read as a literal, serious autobiography of a predator. The performative overstatement is the key that unlocks the whole code. It acts as a neutralizing agent.
Right. The ritualized boasting, the crude wordplay, it is all delivered with an enormous theatrical wink to the audience.
I mean, let's just look at the visual absurdity of it.
Please do.
You have a grown man, now in his late 60s or 70s, running around a massive stadium dressed in a velvet schoolboy uniform.
complete with shorts and a little cap.
Right. Shredding on a guitar while giant cannons fire over his head. You cannot possibly take the hypermasculine threat seriously when the delivery mechanism is literally a cartoonish schoolboy. It's inherently funny.
Exactly. The absurdity deflates the menace. Now, the sources are clear that this doesn't magically erase the problematic nature of the tropes for every single person who hears it.
No, of course not.
But it explains why the band is overwhelmingly received by their massive global fan base as humorous, joyful, and entertaining, rather than genuinely aggressive, toxic, or threatening.
Which leads to some really fascinating, seemingly contradictory fan experiences highlighted in the sociological research.
Tell us about those.
On one hand, you have external critics who look at the lyrics on paper and view the band as reproducing narrow gender hierarchies and objectification. They argue the symbolism is inherently exclusionary to women.
Right. But conversely, the field research shows that many fans, and specifically many women, experience this exact same hard rock scene as a highly supportive, less sexualized, and even liberating space compared to mainstream pop culture.
This is a fantastic sociological puzzle. How can the exact same cultural product be experienced as exclusionary by an outsider, but deeply liberating by an insider?
And how does the analysis explain this?
Through the concept of scene logic. Within heavily coded subcultures, fans don't just passively consume the art, they actively learn to read the rules of the game.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Imagine a young female fan in the crowd at a concert in 1985. The band starts playing a song with incredibly blunt, double entendre lyrics. If you pull those lyrics out of the venue and read them in a vacuum, they are highly problematic. But within the context of scene logic, the shared joke, the cartoonish swagger, the communal, sweaty energy of the stadium, she doesn't experience it as an attack or objectification.
No, she experiences it as empowering. She is in on the joke.
Yes, she possesses the cultural literacy to decode the performance.
Once you understand that the massive swagger is a theatrical performance,
Yeah.
a role being played, the problematic tropes are reinterpreted. The scene logic allows fans of all backgrounds to participate in the raw energy, the rebellion, and the immense volume of the music without necessarily endorsing the literal dictionary meaning of every lyric.
The shared understanding of the code neutralizes the threat.
Exactly.
It allows an incredibly diverse group of people to find deep solidarity and power in a space that, from a distance, might look like a totally homogenous exclusionary boys' club.
And this highly coded, instantly recognizable set of symbols, the schoolboy uniform, the cannons, the iconic lightning bolt and the logo, it doesn't just live inside the walls of the concert hall or within the grooves of the vinyl record.
No, it has completely detached from the music itself and become an entirely separate, wearable entity.
Which transitions us perfectly into the incredible, almost mind-boggling materiality of the AC/DC brand.
Yes, we absolutely have to talk about how this old-school stadium rock band functions so dominantly in the modern, hyper-digital streaming age.
Because AC/DC has evolved into a globally readable symbol. The logo, the specific Gothic typography, the stark black, white, and red color scheme.
You don't even need to speak English or know how to play a chord on a guitar to instantly recognize what that logo represents.
Right, and the research points out that this is a stadium rock band that is absolutely thriving in an era entirely dominated by Spotify algorithms, TikTok trends, and endless invisible digital feeds.
It really makes you wonder, how is a band that refuses to update their sound surviving in the modern digital attention economy?
It comes down to what the researchers call the materiality of the brand. In the modern era, we aren't just talking about AC/DC's music as invisible sound waves. We are talking about music as physical, tangible objects.
Like t-shirts, embroidered patches on denim jackets, gold vinyl reissues, coffee mugs.
Yes. These are not just commercial byproducts. The analysis stresses they are profound social markers.
I mean, I see AC/DC shirts everywhere. I see toddlers at the park wearing them. I see grandparents at the grocery store wearing them.
The analysis mentions that buying a shirt is an act of transgenerational transfer.
Transgenerational transfer. I like that. It's parents physically passing down a worldview to their kids. You don't just put on a cotton shirt, you are putting on an identity.
Exactly.
But I have to stop and challenge this because it feels like a massive contradiction to me based on what we've discussed.
Okay, let's hear the challenge.
Doesn't turning a rebellious, hardworking rock band into a highly merchandised, multi-million-dollar global apparel brand completely destroy the blue-collar authenticity we just spent 30 minutes talking about?
It's a fair question.
I mean, think about punk bands. The minute a punk band prints a plastic lunchbox or licenses their song for a car commercial, the fans revolt. They're labeled sellouts. Why didn't AC/DC fans revolt against the hyper-commercialism?
It's a brilliant comparison, and historically, you're right, many music subcultures view commercialization as the ultimate betrayal. But the analysis argues that for the specific worldview of AC/DC, authenticity and commerce are not viewed as opposites.
Wait, really? They aren't opposites.
No, in fact, they mutually reinforce each other in this specific scene logic. The brand only works millions of shirts, only sell because the symbolic core of the live ritual remains so undeniably strong, consistent, and unchanged.
Ah, I see.
If AC/DC had started making synth pop in the 80s to chase trends, the logo would have lost its meaning and the shirts would be worthless.
So the merch doesn't replace the music. It symbolically extends the experience of the live ritual into the mundane reality of everyday life.
Right.
When you wear that faded black t-shirt with the lightning bolt to the grocery store, you are literally carrying a localized piece of that massive stadium energy with you. You are signaling to strangers in the produce aisle that you belong to this specific meaning system.
Precisely. You are acting as a mobile billboard for the worldview. And this intense physical materiality interacts in a truly fascinating way with the underlying platform logic of the digital streaming age.
This part of the research completely blew my mind. We assume that older bands struggle with algorithms because algorithms favor the new. But the analysis breaks down how AC/DC's specific musical structure is practically weaponized for the modern algorithm, even though Malcolm and Angus wrote these songs decades before the internet was even conceived.
It's crazy, right? It all comes down to the architecture of the riff we discussed earlier.
Walk us through how that works on a platform like Spotify.
In the modern attention economy, platforms monetize based on listen duration. If a listener skips a song in the first 3 to 5 seconds, the artist doesn't get paid, and the algorithm learns not to recommend that song.
Therefore, the survival metric in the digital age is immediate, undeniable engagement.
And what does AC/DC do better than anyone else? Short, highly recognizable, intensely compressed musical signals.
Oh man, think about the opening of Back in Black.
Yes.
It's just a solitary, instantly recognizable snare hit, followed by that massive, crunching 3-chord riff. It takes less than 2 seconds to know exactly what song you're listening to, and the groove hooks you instantly.
Or think about Thunderstruck. That frantic tapping guitar line grabs your brainstem immediately.
They're instantly decodable. An AC/DC riff bypasses the intellectual filter and hits the physical body immediately.
This makes their catalog incredibly functional for algorithms, but also perfectly tailored for short highlight clips on social media, or as an adrenaline-pumping anthem blasting through the PA system of a massive sports arena during a crucial timeout.
The radical simplicity and lack of slow, meandering intros is exactly what allows their music to violently cut through the endless digital noise.
It creates this amazing, counterintuitive paradox of modern music consumption.
What's the paradox?
As recorded music becomes entirely dematerialized, meaning it's no longer CDs or tapes, but just invisible digital streams floating in the cloud. The physical, rare, massive, sweat-drenched event of the stadium concert absolutely skyrockets in both symbolic and economic value.
Wow. Because the live concert provides the one crucial human element that the algorithm, no matter how advanced, absolutely cannot provide.
Which is physical co-presence. The algorithm can give you the sound, but it cannot give you the feeling of 80,000 bodies jumping in unison.
So digital streaming and massive live touring don't compete for AC/DC. They form a perfect, totally self-sustaining feedback loop.
Yes, exactly.
So walk us through that loop. How does a kid today actually enter the AC/DC ecosystem?
Well, the streaming algorithms, looking for high-retention tracks, introduce the classic, instantly engaging riffs to a 14-year-old kid in their bedroom.
Right.
That digital discovery provides a taste of the energy. But because the music is inherently about collective physical release, the digital strain alone isn't enough.
Ah, it creates a craving for the real thing.
Exactly. That discovery drives the teenager to deeply desire the physical, real-world ratification of the stadium show. The invisible stream sells the massive physical ticket.
And the result of that feedback loop is something incredibly rare, practically miraculous, in today's deeply fractured, micro-targeted culture. You have a community where grandfathers, mothers, and teenagers all share the exact same biographical constant.
Which brings us to the final, encompassing analytical layer of our deep dive. The nature of fandom, generations, and rock as a worldview.
The sociological research is very clear on this. AC/DC fandom isn't just about casually liking the music when it comes on the radio. It is a dedicated social practice.
It is a profound form of self-description. When you look someone in the eye and say, I am an AC/DC fan,
Yeah.
you aren't just sharing your Spotify Wrapped.
You are actively signaling an attitude to life. You are adopting a worldview, but crucially, one that completely lacks a complex, pretentious, theoretical framework.
The research highlights how this fandom is a highly structured, self-policing community. There is an internal hierarchy of knowledge.
What kind of knowledge?
Knowing the subtle sonic nuances of the Bon Scott era versus the Brian Johnson era, rigorously debating the historical set lists, collecting rare international vinyl pressings.
So this specialized expertise creates a strong internal bond. It gives people a distinct sense of status, identity, and belonging based purely on shared dedication.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the term the text uses to describe this overall philosophy, the anti-complex worldview.
It's a great label.
It is an ethos built entirely on directness, absolute discipline in your chosen craft, and a very deep, abiding skepticism toward over-refinement, constant rebranding, or intellectual posturing.
Right.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you navigate your own life? It means AC/DC offers a highly organized, highly energetic order in an intensely disorganized, confusing, and stressful world.
It functions as a powerful counteroffer to modern anxiety.
How so?
Well, when every other aspect of life, your career, your digital identity, your politics requires endless interpretation, nuance, and exhausting reinvention, this worldview says, stop.
Just stop.
Yeah. Some things are just solid. Some things don't need to be optimized. Some things just hit you right in the chest. And that physical reality is enough.
But the skeptical part of my brain has to ask, is this all just nostalgia? Are these grandfathers and their faded tour shirts and teenagers discovering Highway to Hell on TikTok, just clinging to a romanticized past that doesn't actually exist anymore? Are they just hiding from the future?
The sociological field research strongly argues no. It is not just looking backward.
Okay, why not?
Nostalgia, by definition, implies a passive, melancholy yearning for something that is permanently gone. But AC/DC fans are doing the exact opposite.
How are they doing the opposite?
By constantly buying tickets to new massive stadium tours, by passionately producing and buying new physical merchandise, and by engaging in incredibly vibrant, active digital fan communities online. These fans are actively reproducing this sense of belonging in the present tense.
So they aren't mourning the past, they are insisting on the present.
Precisely. It is an active, heavily lived culture. It is not a dusty museum exhibit to be quietly observed. It is a living, breathing, incredibly loud ecosystem.
It's the core ethos we've seen running through every single piece of analysis today. It's better to act than to endlessly reflect.
Yes.
It's better to be loud and clear than to be distant and ironic. It's better to be fiercely physically present in a room with other humans than to be digitally fragmented across a dozen screens.
And by sticking stubbornly to those principles, AC/DC transformed what critics called a simple musical reduction into one of the most globally enduring cultural forces in modern history.
They proved that absolute consistency, when paired with undeniable authenticity and structural perfection, is immune to the whims of cultural trends.
Absolutely immune.
Okay, let's bring all of this incredible analysis together. We started this deep dive looking at a band through the lens of a cultural X-ray machine.
We did.
We looked at how AC/DC avoids the murky, diagnostic, muddy waters of modern, fragmented identity by just being completely structurally unshakable.
Right, the concrete pillar.
Exactly. We've seen how they turned a simple three-chord riff into a comprehensive worldview. How they built an astonishing live ritual that demands literal physical truth from its performers.
The proof of truth.
Yes. How they managed to survive the catastrophic loss of their frontman by relying on the sheer strength of their musical structure and letting their fans grieve through the music. And finally, how they absolutely conquered the modern algorithmic attention economy by remaining fiercely, undeniably physical.
And as we wrap up, we ask you, the listener, to take this framework and consider it in the context of your own life.
Yeah, think about the pressures you face to constantly rebrand, upgrade, or fragment yourself.
Where might you be overcomplicating your own work, your own passions, or your own identity? In a world that ruthlessly demands constant reinvention, is there a core part of yourself where applying a bit of AC/DC reduction might help?
Like finding the foundational, unshakable riff of your own life and simply playing it with absolute, unapologetic conviction? Might that provide you with a clearer, more powerful, and ultimately more authentic path forward?
I think that is such a powerful takeaway. Find your foundational riff and stop apologizing for playing it.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought built on everything we've unpacked today about authenticity and technology. We've spent this time dissecting how AC/DC's absolute stubborn refusal to change a single thing is the ultimate secret to their enduring power.
Right.
But project this into the very near future. We are rapidly entering an era where artificial intelligence can instantly generate an infinite amount of complex, constantly evolving, hyper-personalized music.
It's happening right now.
An AI will be able to generate a flawless, mathematically perfect song for every single micromood you could ever possibly experience.
Sure.
So in that rapidly approaching future, when limitless, costless complexity is available at the push of a button, will the most valuable, the most rebellious, and the most fiercely human art form left on planet Earth simply be a group of flawed, sweating human beings stubbornly refusing to play anything other than 3 basic chords together in a room?
That is a fantastic question.
Something to chew on the next time you hear that thunderous snare hit. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been an absolute privilege to unpack this with you. Thank you for listening.